Himalayas.
We are not
As we
live
talk-
now. We are not live. We are not live now.
Okay.
You will see on the top of the screen live streaming.
Okay.
It's now preparing. Wait.
World's two most populous nations are locked in a standoff in the Himalayas. It is my firm belief it is not a good sign. If we talk about cyber and defense installations, technology is growing by leaps and bounds. The cyberspace is all set to become a very, very complex domain. I'm Cheeni Kumar and welcome to the program today. You're watching a special conversation containing and combating the rise of China, foreign policy and cyber warfare, Cheeni Kum. This comes to you from Womennovator, which is a flagship initiative focused on SDG 5 Global and is a virtual incubator for women, supporting women entrepreneurs in scaling operations domestically and internationally and creating distribution networks. Womennovator creates women leaders to be directors and become job creators, and women community leaders to be policy change makers. I'm pleased to introduce our esteemed panelists today. We have with us Kamaljeet Kaur, the Managing Director of the CAP Edge Solutions, a fraud investigator and a digital forensic consultant with over 14 years of experience. Welcome, ma'am. Joining us is Professor Shrikant Kondapalli, a professor in Chinese studies at the Jawaharlal Nehru University, New Delhi. Mr. Kondapalli, frequent writer and commentator on national and international media, and must watch on the show. We'll be joined shortly by Professor Trivedi Singh from the IPS, a resource person to many organizations such as CBI, NPA, ICAI, NCRB, and the state judicial academies. Is a regular keynote speaker at various national and international conferences. He'll be joining us shortly. Tripti Subani, the founder of Womennovator, success coach for SMEs and MSMEs and women-led businesses. We also have with us, and are very proud to welcome, Wing Commander Ajay Lele, who's working with the Institute of Defense Studies Analysis, an India think tank on security and strategic studies. Welcome, sir. We have with us Amit Dubey, author and national security expert, specializing in areas of cybercrime investigation, training, and research. Welcome, sir. Munish Sharma ji, a consultant in the Strategic Technologies Center at the Manohar Parrikar Institute for Defense Studies and Analysis. We welcome you, Munish. I'd like to begin first with you, Kamaljeet ji. If you could give me an idea of what cyber vulnerability is and how it is a part of our daily lives.
Thank you, Nidhi. Thanks for giving this opportunity to talk about this topic. And this series 3, Cheeni Kum, is a joint collaboration between Womennovator and Cabbage, which is a company which I run. So I'll just take few minutes and talk about this fact as to how cyber vulnerability is a part of our day-to-day life. A research says that only 3% time there are technical attacks when it comes to cyber attacks. When hackers, people who are fraudster or hackers are actually exploiting the technical hitches. 97% time, it is the psychological manipulation which actually occurs. And the psychological manipulation actually occurs through social engineering. It's a very interesting fact that how people like very well-trained, well-educated, well-known still get into the trap of social engineering. Be it somebody sending you friend request on Facebook to LinkedIn or any other way. The social engineering is a very, very common technique which happens when it comes to cyber attack. So most of us who are exposed to internet today are exposed to social engineering tactics. And end of the day, the factor which works here is psychological manipulation. The second attack, which is very, very common these days, is phishing. Phishing is simply, to put it in a very simple manner, that we get a mail from a very legitimate source, which seems like a mail from bank, mail from RBI, mail from income tax office, and so on and so forth. At the end of the day, this is not the legitimate source. Most of us psychologically get manipulated and we end up clicking on the attachment. The moment you click on the attachment, either there will be some kind of cyber vulnerability which comes into picture, or you will be manipulated to disclose more and more information, personal sensitive information, which may start with your KYC to bank details and lot of confidential details like your passports. So these kind of vulnerabilities are very much part of our day-to-day life. Since we have a lot of renowned speakers who have a lot of practical exposure, I wouldn't take much of time and give it to my next speaker to talk quite in length as to how this is part of our day-to-day life. So that's all from my end, and given to the next speaker. Thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing such valuable insights. I now would like Shrikantji to come in here. Shrikant sir, how has been this ban on the 59 apps that has taken place in June and in July, how is this connected to cyber security? If you could amplify and extrapolate on this.
Thank you very much for inviting me for the show once again. A very good evening to all of you. I think the Galwan incident on June 15th night, when 20 Indian soldiers were killed by the Chinese side. Also the COVID-19 related aspects since March this year, when we went into a lockdown continuously for more than 100 days. I think this has provided an opportunity for, since we are all dependent heavily on information technologies while we were sitting at home to connect with each other, this was also an opportunity for hackers from all over. But specifically, we noticed that the hackers were mainly from China or North Korea. The attacks are mainly in terms of business intelligence, especially as the vaccine development has become a major key factor in the COVID-19 addressing. So much of the attacks, not just in India, but even in the US or in Europe, that was mainly the focus was on the vaccine development. So pharmaceutical companies, R&D institutions, these are the ones which have been hacked into for getting the business intelligence, number one. Number two, it is also not new for India, because we have had the attacks on Baba Atomic Research Center before. We had attacks on Prime Minister's office, the National Security Council Secretariat. Computers have been hacked. There were also the attacks on the business groups like Jio, Reliance Jio, or the Airtel, the telecom provider. Then we have also had substantial attacks on the other business firms, not just the defense related or transportation infrastructure, but also the other businesses that have been hacked into. So it appears to be a concerted effort originating from Changsha in China or Guangzhou in China or in other places. There is also the roundabout attacks coming from different other places. I mean, there are some spectacular cases like in Estonia or in terms of Iran, the attacks that took place. In the case of India and other countries, these were gradual. These are so far, but last 2-3 months we have seen substantial attacks. Some 40,000 attacks have been reported in the Indian media and other places. So I think the last COVID-19 as well as the Galwan incident triggered more attacks on India. I think we need to notice this is partly because we have also willy-nilly allowed many companies to take over the telecom industry. Some 80 to 90% of the telecom sector was grabbed by the Chinese firms. We did put some conditions before. The Home Ministry had certain restrictions on what kind of tools, gadgets, others could be put up in these instruments, etc. But BSNL has substantial Chinese component, for example, which is where much of the attacks could take place. So we have previously allowed, because of the WTO regulations on free trade and others, we have allowed. It is only recently that we woke up in putting restrictions. We did put restrictions before. There was some news in the 1990s about some of the telecommunication channels were diverted towards Al-Qaeda by these Chinese companies during the 1990s, when the 9/11 things have not happened yet. There were concerns expressed during that time, but now this has become much more concerted in nature. So that's one difference, and this was triggered mainly by COVID-19 opportunity in terms of business, but also heavy dependence of everyone on the IT. Secondly, Galwan incident obviously is the trigger for us to look at the kind of attacks that we have been seeing now.
Perfect. I mean, what you said made a lot of sense, sir. That means we could be well looking at vaccine nationalism. That's going to be the next overcry, as I see it. You know, that who makes it first. Right now, India is connecting with US in major programs. There are about 100 players already, as we talk, who have gone into the second ready. And let's see what happens. But there could be a lot of truth in what you're saying, because I heard that myself yesterday, that there could be vaccine nationalism now coming into play. So we need to be very, very aware of cybersecurity. On that note, I'll ask you, Tripti, as the founder of Womennovator, a success coach for SMEs and MSMEs, how do you figure out, give me an overview of cybersecurity?
Thank you so much, Nidhi. First of all, I would like to thank you for bringing in such an important conversation and for all the speakers for coming in and discussing this as very important from a woman aspect, the cyber crimes which are happening. I would just quickly share the why this was very important topic, and this is the second time we're talking about cybersecurity and related issues. And so I actually thought that now, since all the kids, youngsters have options of exploring different opportunity, not just becoming a chartered accountant or IAS officer or a doctor, they have more options and they're free to pursue them. So I was very happy about that now the new generation will not face that pressure. But to my surprise, when I was discussing with you expert from cybersecurity, I was shocked to see the concern of cybersecurity today. The cybersecurity concern which raised my eyebrows was that today the kid is not under pressure of what he will become, but under pressure on how he will look on social media. Like you started your interaction with the kind of followers you have today. Our kids, our students today are being segregated on the basis of if you posted a post and if you don't have those kind of likes, then they are buying those likes. And if they don't have money to buy those likes, they're actually doing activities, or they are getting into such, I can't even speak about such initiatives, which can be quite
Detrimental, yes.
Yeah, detrimental. And imagine a kid being isolated because he didn't get those 100 likes, and now the kids are sitting on the basis of people who get good likes and who are not, are segregated. So I think it's and this is one reason why we are focusing, because our female kids are exposed to a very big challenge right now. The cases are increasing. We are being pushed on the information. We are not very sure about when we are accepting or downloading app from different countries, what kind of information or data analytics are being stolen, or data which are taken into consideration when we are saying, okay, whether it's Gmail. To my surprise, when I was shown by a cybersecurity expert in how, when we download Gmail openly, like we go on our phone and we switch off the location, but when we activate a Gmail account, there is an option to switch off your location. So he showed me all the places I have traveled to in last 5 years, what hotels I've stayed in, and I was like, I didn't even think that I'm switching off my location of the phone, but it's Gmail is tracking me everywhere. So I would like to say that this has motivated me to give real importance to this topic. And I'm really thankful one again for taking this up with Womennovator to all our panelists. So Nidhi, we can't even imagine the kind of the concern we should be, or we are just ignoring this aspect in our life.
We just pushing it away. Absolutely agree. And our children and the future generation needs to understand, as you rightly said, that it is organic likes that matter. You know, these fake ones which you buy and all, I think they fall off because I'm into all of this. They fall off. We see that, happening in another 24 hours or so. So it's not worth it, and it's not worth that kind of attention. You must be able to cultivate yourself and the fulcrum of your activities so as to, be more likable. And I really don't think being more likable without substance really matters, because I think at the end of the day, there are no takeaways for people without depth. On that note, I would like to now ask Ajay Lela first. Ajay sir, will you please come in on cyber warfare, and then we go across to Amit sir. Ajay sir, I have to ask you how banning 59 apps China versus India's economy. How do you look at this, Ajay sir?
I think one has to look at it not only from an economic perspective, but at a wider social as well as a strategic perspective. Because maybe banning of apps at initial stage will have certain amount of impact on the economy. But at a larger scale, if one looks at it, you look at the entire debate which is happening on 5G also. It was thought that if you don't have a 5G, you will lose something in life. But now there has been a talk that your 4G itself is capable of looking at whatever the options which have been made available for 5G. So as far as apps are concerned, you have banned many apps. To best of my knowledge, hardly any of those apps were actually in use other than TikTok or WeChat or other apps. Otherwise, the rest of the apps were almost redundant apps, or they were in a dormant position, so it hardly makes a difference. As far as TikTok is concerned, even US also has gone ahead and banned that app. So globally, if you see that, there is going to be options which are being made available immediately as a replacement to TikTok. So it's not that China was having a total say into these activities, and whatever technologies which they were providing, I think alternatives are going to emerge in a very short period of time. So under these circumstances, I think it's not going to have much of an impact on economy. Maybe people who are addicted to TikTok videos and other things, or so-called TikTok stars, they will have some problems initially because everybody is sitting at home and nothing else to do. So why not to do a TikTok? But I think they also will get certain amount of options readily available in coming few days.
Anything else you'd like to add about the economy of China? How would this impact perhaps in a larger perspective?
You see, as far as economy of China is concerned, it is not only dependent only on their IT apps. That one has to be very clear about it. As far as various other Chinese apps are there, you got few American enterprises
which are being run by the people of Chinese origin. So there is a certain amount of interconnectivity also between China, the US, and other things. Today we are talking on Zoom. It is essentially run by a person of a Chinese origin only. So it's not that every Chinese app which is giving a direct or indirect benefit is getting banned. So global economy is a very complex economy, and only banning few apps is not going to make a very major impact. But I think the impact will be visible over a period of time. Initially, the impact will be of a very lesser nature, but over a period of time only we will come to know whether the actual impact is happening. Or China is also, because you see, at end of the day, let's give China also certain amount of a basic intelligence that they will also come out with certain amount of alternative mechanisms if their economy is suffering. So it's going to be a game which will be played. Right now, we are seeing basically a technology game played between so-called technology Cold War happening between US and China. Only time will tell how it is going to span out. But if you really look at it, recently you had the US congressional committees grilling four major giants, that is Google, Facebook, and a few other people, because it appears that not only in China, but even by the companies which are majorly controlling the internet per se globally, they are having certain amount of a coterie of 4 to 5 companies which is actually managing the entire global business. So the global business is also going to suffer because of only it is in the hands of 4 to 5 people. So there is an attempt to ensure that this business also gets slightly coming down. So you have more amount of companies which will make investments. So I think the cyber business, not only at the level of China, but at the level of US and internationally, is being looked afresh, particularly in this COVID era. And only time will tell how much amount of impact it will have on Chinese economy.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for letting us know that, and we will also wait and see who the game changers are in the actual war that begins between eroding Chinese economy. On that note, I'd like to ask Amit sir your question, please. Cyber warfare in COVID times and post-COVID times. How do you look at that?
Nidhi, thank you so much. First of all, I would like to add something what Mr. Lele was just mentioning, because I would like to give you some numbers. Do you know what is the valuation of TikTok? It is $100 billion. And they have 25 to 30% market capture from India. Do you know what is the valuation of WeChat? Their parent company Tencent has a valuation $500 billion. Now I'm showing you these numbers just because this is not the GDP of Pakistan. Pakistan GDP is just 250, close to 250, 300 billion. Just these two companies, and I'm referring 57 applications, those have almost on an average more than $2 billion valuation. If you look at share it, they have just made 100 crore revenue last year from India. If you refer Alibaba's UC Web, they invested 200 crores in India in 2019. So if somebody is investing 200 crore, they would definitely be expecting a good return out of it, like 10 times or 8 times. Why these numbers are important? Because this will give you a just like how much impact is there. So I'm a little differing from Mr. Lele. It is definitely a big trend on China, because the future economy is completely on data. And these are the backbones for these data channels. How these Chinese companies are collecting this data from all around the world, and they are actually leading those businesses because of these companies. And that's why China is worried. Now, if you see in this data race, Google is leading, Facebook is leading, WhatsApp is leading, or whatever service providers are there, they're all offering their services free of cost. And they are multi-billion-dollar companies, like they are valued to the most what you can't even think of. If I give you an example, WhatsApp, when it was founded in like 2009, and it was acquired in 2013, they were valued $19.3 billion. In just 3 years, $19.3 billion. It was in history, because even Anand Mahindra does not have that much wealth. They have 70 odd companies, and they are selling all, and they are actually charging money for all their services and products. And WhatsApp is offering free of cost. So try to understand the game behind it. It is a data game. So the company, they have more acquisition, they can actually show that their reach is high, they will be valued high. So this is the real impact, because the future economy today, say like, okay, GDP or the percentage of GDP may not be that much based on these IT companies, but tomorrow is completely dependent on these companies. I'm sure like we'll see very soon, and we have already seen Jio's success. The Reliance Jio is valued so much because of their acquisition. And that is something everybody is riding on it. Now coming back to the security aspect of it, all these list of companies we have been discussing since a long time with CERT and MITI, like these should be banned. Galwan is just a triggering incident, but these were under discussion since a long time. And if you remember in June, first week, there was a news on Vivo mobile phones. There were more than 15,500 mobile phones. Those were running in India with same IMEI number. And this was caught through Meerut police. Now it was strange, 15,000 mobile phones with same IMEI number. They are creating lots of law and order issues in India, investigation challenges. Criminals can use it, and there is lots of economical losses as well for government of India because they might be saving taxes and cheating India. Now these are the pointers; those were already there. Because of that, Chinese companies were under push and under radar. Now, if you take an example of TikTok were actually snooping us, and why iPhone 14? When this iPhone 14 OS was launched, we found like TikTok was reading clipboard memory. The clipboard memory is the keyboard. Whatever we type on keyboard, they read it. Why they were reading keyboard, even if I'm typing something on Instagram or WhatsApp, why TikTok is reading? Now, this was a big concern, and then TikTok solved this issue and they fixed it up. But then these kind of questions were always there on Chinese companies. That they are snooping us, they are taking data, they are actually, for example, camcorder, this cam scanner application. All the data that we scan through cam scanner, it is available on dark web. Now these government agencies and officially all these evidences by police department, they normally scan with cam scanner and they share it with each other. Now if this data is leaked and available to Chinese servers, it is a big issue for us. Similarly, share it application, whatever we are sharing to it. So these are the real concerns on data privacy. Now these are solved because if we have banned these applications, we are really taking a tough stand against our data privacy. And our personal data privacy bill was already under discussion in Parliament. So I think all over, if you will see the complete picture of it, I think this is the right time when we should have banned it. Galwan is just a triggering incident, but this should have been banned long back. They're actually not only taking lots of data, but they were also denting our economy. So I think this is my take on the current COVID situation, because all around the world, there is almost 300% increase on cybercrime, but China is always taking the benefit of that situation. Most of these attacks, I'll just share with you an incident of today morning. A leading news channel, they got an attack, phishing attack. And when I was investigating that, I found that this registered server was Zinnet, which is from China. So this is a DNS server, and they were hosting a portal which looked like the portal of an Indian news agency, and they were cheating people.
Yeah.
So all this is happening, and we know like these traces are there. We can easily attribute these things to China. So I think this would definitely give them a big impact.
As you rightly said, it's not just about Galwan, but there are so many other issues. And you also spoke of self-reliance. Our Honorable Prime Minister, Shri Narendra Modi, has been talking every day about Bharat and how to make that Munishji, I'd like you to share with us your thoughts on India's cyber warfare capability and our concerns.
Please come again. You are inaudible.
All right.
Yeah.
I'm saying, as we talk of a self-reliant India, as our Honorable Prime Minister has been saying that time and again, how do you look at cyber warfare capability and India's security concerns?
Well, if we try to put this into self-reliant campaign or
bilateral, multilateral, yeah.
Yeah. All right. So see, I think most important factor here is to consider that right now technology, the way we look at it now, like when we speak about like data-oriented companies or information-oriented companies, it's not a shop floor kind of industry where you have a factory over here and then you sell products. Like they are globally spread. So the technology supply chains are themselves so globally interdependent, interlinked that you just cannot chuck one part or one component or one company out of it. It might destabilize the whole ecosystem. So when we talk about self-reliance, I think we should target something what we call as to be more competitive as compared to somebody who's already there doing well in the market. For example, if you want to take up the example of Huawei, for example, like in a very broad brush, like Huawei's revenue for the last financial year was close to probably, I think, $108 billion. Our entire IT industry put together exports come around, I think, 130 or 140 billion dollars. That includes TCS, Infosys, HCL, everybody. Around thousands of, I think, IT companies put together. So I think competitiveness. So rather than just being self-dependent or independent, what you call in terms of technology, I think more important for us is to be much more better than how we are at present, especially in high technology sector. Telecommunication, for example, do we have any single vendor who can do well better than ZTE or Huawei in terms of price as well as in terms of quality? Can we take on Nokia, Siemens? Can we take on Motorola? I mean, I leave the answer to the audience. But even if you look at in terms of manufacturing of smartphones, like we know very well, like the kind of market which Xiaomi or Oppo or other these Chinese brands have taken over.
Yeah.
So my argument here is that I think just being self-reliant for yourself may not help you, but to be globally well, to be so competitive that you simply outstead all the existing, players from the market is something what we should target for. And looking at cyber from this point of view, I think for critical areas, if there is a terminology, what do we call as the critical information infrastructure. So simply speaking of key areas, I think we should do these things on our own as much as possible, whether you talk about the hardware part or the software part of it. But we will have to be dependent on other vendors, whether they are of Chinese origin, American origin, European origin, doesn't matter. But from our end, I think what we can do to kind of mitigate this risk is to have very high degree of what is called as information assurance. So, for example, if I'm importing a telecom gear, whether it's coming from from Nokia or whether it is coming from Huawei, they should undergo same kind of security check. And once their working is certified, once everything is ascertained, then only the next the entire order of or deployment of that particular gear would happen. So to make sure that we have a framework which lets us test these imports so thoroughly that we don't lose out on security, that's first and foremost requirement for us. So I mean my argument, the core argument here is to make sure that we have a very strong information assurance framework so that we don't let these things sneak through and hurt us in the long term.
Yeah, as you rightly said, I'll add one more sub question to this, Manish. I love the way you said, do we have a substitute to Nokia? Do we have a substitute to any other Chinese Motorola, for example? We don't. But why are we so dependent? As we're talking COVID times, I think most of our pharma industry is importing everything from China, every small thing. So how do we juxtapose Atmanirbhar Bharat with this until we start, Is it that the Chinese products are so good and so, cheap and widely available? What is the logic behind this?
I think if you look at the Chinese story, a lot of government support helped them rise up, probably beginning with the reforms in 1978 onwards, right? So I think reforming up does not just mean opening up your economy. Reforming up means reforming up your processes, reforming up the way you conduct business, reforming up the way you build products, and reforming up your innovation ecosystem. So if you look at even like by comparison, if you look at the Chinese, I mean, I would say the composition of their exports, or it's moving away from mechanized towards more informationized. So if you look at this clubbing of what is called as the BAT, it's Baidu, it's Alibaba and Tencent, right? These kind of companies. You have four giants from America, it's, Facebook, Google, and of the companies of the sorts. So what I'm saying is, since we have passed, we have come out of that mechanized, era. So the entire focus is more on information. So we'll have to invest in next generation thinking, next generation technologies, artificial intelligence, for example, right? If you look at the way big technology, what we call them as the big technology companies. I'm sorry, light is spent off of here. So I'll just continue speaking. So if you look at the way, if you just look at the way, these technology, big technology companies, they just ride on information wave. And they think at least 20-25 years ahead in time, and then accordingly they plan what products they want to launch. Typical example is iPhone. So if Steve Jobs had not thought about something as trivial as a human finger as a navigation, as a controlling feature, we would have been having smartphones with us right now. So just very core thing I would say is to stay ahead of this technology curve and to stay ahead of everybody, you have to focus a lot on your core competencies. One reality as of now is that you cannot do everything on your own. So if we call it as 100% self-reliance, that's unachievable because you just cannot do it. Look at domestically, we hire, domestic helps, we do a lot of things, we outsource certain things. So do what you are best at and then try to cash on that. So that's my argument to my
absolutely point taken. Taking very realistic view and very well spoken. Thank you so much. Yeah. Is Kamalji ji here? Is she here? Kamalji ji? All right.
Yeah, I'm here.
Yes. आपसे पूछना चाहूंगी कि आपको किस तरह चुनौती लगती है जब आप कोई फ्रॉड इन्वेस्ट करती हैं? What are the kind of challenges that you sort of come across?
See, it depends. Like when it comes to retail, so one, the data privacy is definitely a very big concern, whether it comes to corporate, when it comes to individual. So that is one of the challenge where we see how the data privacy issue arises. So that is one of the challenge. Secondly, जहाँ पर cyber laws picture में आते हैं, that's another thing which we face as a challenge in investigation, especially in India, because बहुत सारे एंगल्स ऐसे होते हैं जहाँ साइबर लॉ बहुत क्लियर नहीं है. Either a normal individual is not aware, or probably there is something where the more information, more clarity is required. So these are two very ongoing challenges we see when it comes to investigation.
Thank you so much for sharing your insights with us. Shrikant sir, I'd like to ask you, now that India has stepped up its vigil against the cyber attacks, one question that comes to my mind is that why were Indian software companies not allowed to operate in the China market earlier? Also, I'd like you to extrapolate on the foreign policy as you see it now.
Thank you very much. I think since the beginning, there has been some restrictive trade practices within the China market. As you all know, the WTO, the World Trade Organization, mentioned that China is not a market economy, that it doesn't allow the outside products, including from India, to circulate in the China market. There are some 6 sectors: agriculture, telecom, banking, securities, that is stock exchanges. There is also the automobile industry, energy. These sectors have to be opened up if you enter the WTO. However, China opened up only a few sectors, and in relation to India, they have a lot of non-tariff barriers. For instance, none of the state-owned enterprises in China, who control nearly half of the GDP of the country, none of these state-owned enterprises have allowed the Indian software companies to circulate in their products. So this is a huge gaping hole. Unlike, say, BSNL, unlike, say, other Indian PSUs, public sector units, which have allowed because of the least tender that is announced in the business transactions. Unlike these, the Chinese have no allowance for the Indian software companies. So that's how we lost in many of the contracts. Let me give you a specific example. The TCS was banned from investing in the Shanghai Stock Exchange information, loading, meaning those packages, because they thought that this is a financial intelligence adda, and so they cannot allow a foreign company like TCS to operate. However, we have allowed in many of our companies the Chinese products to be sold, the hardware, the software, everything else, because we followed those WTO norms. And it's only this January we woke up and made restrictions on the kind of investments that China can make in the infrastructure. Mr. Nitin Gadkari, for example, had put up in the public domain on the restrictions that could be placed. I would like to say that as Munish Sharma mentioned, there was a lot of Chinese state-backed subsidies, including for Huawei, some $85 billion of subsidies given to those companies in order to become global conglomerates. Unlike in India, where you have to fend for yourselves, there is no government backing for the private companies. You have to survive in this anarchic world order. In the Chinese case, the Huawei has huge subsidies given by the state. ZTE, Chongqing, as they call in Chinese. There are many other companies who have been, given preferential trade practices in terms of raw materials, in terms of marketization, in terms of valuation, commercial transactions, or others. And this is actually a contentious point between US and China in the trade war that happened in about 19 months for the past 2 years. So we are entering also into that phase now with China, with this app ban as well as with the restrictions on investments. But we woke up substantially pretty late. Of course, never too late on these issues. So I think because of the restrictions in the China market, we suffered a lot, not just in the software, but also in the pharmaceuticals. After the Wuhan meeting and Chennai Connect, they did make some amendments on this issue. Yet, in terms of the concrete imports for China, this has not been very substantial. They did allow some 29 drugs, but that is not enough for us to bridge the trade deficits, which are more than, say, $70 billion in trade deficits in 1 year, but cumulatively nearly $900 billion of trade deficit. So from the point of view of the app ban, initially 59 and then extended to nearly 49, I think the effort was to insist on reciprocity. If you allow our products to go into the Chinese market without any restrictive practices, then we allow you to come into the Indian market. I think to that extent, the Cheeni Kum is a good initiative in telling the Chinese that, see, this is not a free lunch.
Mm-hmm. Perfect. Very well spoken, sir. Here I'd like Ajay Lele, sir, to please come in. Sir, Ajay, sir. Could you please tell the viewers and all the people who are watching the program also, how globally has, in your words, China's image been eroded?
You see, let's accept the fact that after particularly Trump had come into the power,
yeah.
Can you hear me? Yeah. After Trump had come into the power, China was being looked differently at a global level. This is because if you really look at the trade war which was happening, it had taken a particular shape where US had taken a stance that no more anymore as far as China is concerned, and they are not going to budge down to the China's pressure tactics. What we were witnessing, a grandiose plan which has been put forward by China called BRI, where they were trying to conquer almost entire world through trade practices, through various practices which are associated with businesses, with an underpinning of a strategic element involved into it. They were making significant amount of investments in various countries, and those countries over a period of time were realizing that they are not in a position to pay back the Chinese loans, neither they are in a position to actually push China away from those countries. Let's take the case of Sri Lanka. As far as Sri Lanka was concerned, China gave good amount of money to them. Subsequently, Sri Lanka realized that they can't pay it back. So they had given them a place where they can build a port, and almost a port-like city, the work is already on, where something akin to Singapore or Dubai is getting developed on the banks of where at the Colombo and adjoining regions. So that's the way the China has started making progress. They were making investments into African regions, Latin American countries, and other countries also. You had examples like countries like Sierra Leone who decided that they will not come on the BRI project. So countries all over the world had already started understanding China's ulterior motives of investment doing via BRI route. Few countries had no other option but to budge down to Chinese pressure because they were doing financially pretty bad. But I think Trump has changed the game and he has actually pushed China to a corner. And subsequently, it so happened that China decided to do something very fishy on India's borders. And again, one of the biggest major economies which is developing into the world. And as far as China is concerned, it was one of the biggest markets for them also. You take the case not of a normal products, but even the products like your Diwali crackers. So all your festivities and all that, all and sundry was coming from China. Now, all of a sudden, now China has understood that their route is going to get stopped. At the same time, there is a significant amount of a dependence on China also, particularly in the field of pharmaceuticals and other arenas. As you were making a question earlier, that why there is so much of a dependence as far as China is concerned, particularly in the arenas of materials and minerals, there is a significant amount of a dependence because China is as such rich as far as their geography is concerned in the arenas of minerals and materials. So they have got an advantage from a geography point of view. They have done, on the other hand, significant amount of investments to extract those minerals and materials. So what happens is that if I have to do that sort of extraction into my country, it costs me fortune. But if I import from China, it costs me very less amount of money. So countries like India, countries like USA, were highly dependent on China as far as minerals, your rare earth materials and other things are concerned. I think that dependence one has to reduce over a period of time. So right now, I think the China and US, their relations are at a crossroad. So is the global economy. I think the problem has got further complicated because of the COVID crisis. So as I was making the point earlier, now the US elections are on the way. Let's see who again gets back to the power. Our the new government is going to change their policies towards China. I think all will become clear in another 4 to 5 months period.
Like it's become very clear today that Sri Lanka, of course, would be perhaps advantage China. And now I'd like to ask Amit sir, how do you look at data security purposes? How do you feel they steal the data and eventually use it?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, like there are this is an indirect way of getting the data through applications, through services.
Could you do something for your audio? There is a lag audio. Yes.
Is it clear now? Better? Okay, thank you. So as I mentioned, like these applications, mobile applications and games and also utility services. So you could see like most of these applications, those are banned. Either they are browsers or utility like sharing applications or video editing applications or games. Now these are the applications, those are actually used very frequently in in this region, subcontinent, and they have a huge base. And that is the indirect way of getting the data. Now, how do they use this data? Once they have this data, they start profiling you. They start creating a different sort of sectors of the people. Like, okay, these are the people those are of this opinion. These are the people those are of this opinion. They use this particular application more and less. And so that sort of sectorial identification helps them to further utilize their mindsets. Believe me, anybody's decision-making capabilities can be changed using the data set. Because we are nothing but we are the product of the data that has been fed to us since our birth.
Correct.
Information that we have been absorbing. So we just start defending that information. We just start behaving like we own that information. But we were given to that information. We never realized like this is an indirect way of manipulating your mind. So that is something which has started happening already. And it has been happened earlier as well in elections and campaigns and product marketing and other things. But now, as a state-sponsored activities, it is happening widely. We call it APT attacks, advanced persistent threats. And most of these groups, those are APT groups, they are from China and Iran or other such North Korean countries. Now whatever threat that we have observed in last 3-4 months during COVID, most of these attacks are attributed to the APTs from China. Even Australian attacks. There were some companies in Australia, they were attacked from China, Chinese APTs. Now, these kind of attacks, they are using social engineering techniques, they are using smart payloads, they are using all technical information that they have from these companies already. I'll give you some data. I was just giving a gist of dark web to some organizations in India, and I found more than 15,000 mid-level organizations, like those are not big startups and all. Their some part of information of their employees and credentials or login passwords and is already available on dark web. And this has been happening slowly. And to name it, like even some sensitive organizations, like those are in defense and such kind of manufacturing, their such sensitive data is available over there. Now, how this data has been leaked out and who all are actually having this data, this information is not that clear because it is on dark web now and it has been sourced to different channels. So that's why I'm saying like this is now has reached to that level where we can say it is a cyber war, because there are such bodies, state-sponsored bodies, they are actually sourcing this data through these legal and illegal channels. When I say legal channels, these are applications. When these application servers are there, for example, Zoom applications, if everything is routed through Chinese servers in an unencrypted way, there is a possibility that this data can be recorded and misused through these servers, and the people who are actually state sponsored and they have the government backing itself, they can misuse this information. So whether it is ShareIt, whether it is Cam Scanner, whether it is Zoom or any such application, they are actually capable to give you a big dent, because the data that you are using through these applications could be very, very serious. Even the bar officers I have seen, they are scanning the documents through Cam Scanner, and I stopped them. I asked them, don't do that, because it may be leaked out so easily. So these are the threats, and we foresee this, like this has been happening since almost 2-3 years recently, very aggressively. We have already classified groups of app, and we have registered, like we have already given this request to our authorities, like this should be banned because they are actually they could misuse this information. They are anyway taking this information. So on an average, any Chinese app, they take 35% more permission from a similar kind of app. If you compare, suppose there is a video editing app from China and video editing app from somewhere else, you will see they are taking more permissions from your mobile phone. Why do they take those permissions? Why do they take phone book access? Why do they take internal memory access? So these kind of challenges that we have already sensed, complained, and informed authorities. And I think from data security perspectives, these are a few points that I would like to mention over here, and these were my concerns.
Absolutely, I agree with you about the vulnerability of on nuclear facilities and cybersecurity threats to all these hackers. And I'd like Munishji to add to this. Munishji, please come in and let us know about the initiatives taken by Department of Technology and all our ministries to control these cyber attacks coordinated by the Chinese hackers.
What is being done, or I just missed the last bit of the question.
What initiatives have been taken by the Department of Technology to control cyber attacks coordinated by Chinese hackers, sir?
All right. So if you look at long-term initiatives, then I think beginning with CERT, which we had, which went up around 2004. After that, to look at the specifics of critical information infrastructure, a new entity was raised in 2014. So broadly, these two entities look at like day-to-day activities as far as cybersecurity is concerned. Then a lot of initiatives, I would say, at more individual level, in which people are being more aware, are being made aware or sensitized about the threats what they could be facing, on a daily basis from these kind of applications. Advisories are being issued. There was an initiative a couple of years back, by the CERT. It's called as Cybersecurity Kendra. Along with that, if you look at institutionally what is being done, all the companies, I mean the PSUs, all the government departments are people especially who use mobile phones, people who use computers on a daily basis. They are being more aware. They are being made more aware of how do they make sure that their information, like the kind of the computers which they use, they don't end up being the compromised systems in that case. So a lot of public awareness, I would say at one end. Along with that, a lot of technical initiatives channeled through our search, channel through the NCIPC have been happening. So very broadly, but one point which I thought I should specifically mention about the question which you asked to Amitji was which for the sake of audience, I just want to point out that there's a terminology, it's called as psychographic micro-targeting. So these companies, they pick up data which you feed them. It's not like they have taken it from you, I would say, because when you make your post, when you share your location, when you share your photographs, when you share where you are eating, where you are traveling, what kind of things you like, what are your hobbies. So this is the information which you have given them. And I would say they would be well within their legal limits, because if you read through the terms and conditions of Google or Facebook for that matter, you give them authority to use your photographs for whatever purpose they want to, right? So I think they could, what I'm saying is they could very well be within their legal limits, but it's our responsibility at the end of the day to take ownership of our own actions, and we don't serve everything to them on a plate like, okay, this is my data, and then whatever you want to do it, and then use it probably for election campaigning or marketing. And then at the end of the day, it's the common people who's the target of these attacks or these kind of manipulative actions.
I'd like to extrapolate on this and ask you another question, Munish.
Yep.
Tell me how you're in a think tank, IDSA, so how do you kind of defense installations? Nobody gives out their data. How does that sort of somehow manage its way?
I really cannot comment about defense installations because first and foremost, if you look at the way our cybersecurity architecture is there right now in the country, defense has been completely kept out of the civilian entities, specifically speaking about CERT and NCIPC. Defense is completely out of it because defense has got its own ecosystem, right? So it's separate from the public, I would say the civilian cyber defense agencies. I could term them as so. But the thing is,
but yet, as Shrikant sir mentioned in his conversation, they did get access to a few places. How did that happen? I'd like to just know for my understanding.
At the end of the day, it's the see. If you look at technology, right, the very nuts and bolts of technology. At the end of the day, the same technology is being used in different installations. They don't use a different kind of OS or different kind of system for email communication, or probably, I mean, they all use smartphones. Most of them do use WhatsApp. Even a lot of defense personnel were using these applications which were banned. Probably, I don't know the numbers, but they must have been there on a few of the mobile phones, because at the end of the day, it's a personal device. So you are free to install applications on that and use it in your own way, but it's a very basic thing to understand that you don't pursue any official activity on a personal device. So if it's a personal laptop which I carry, I'll make sure that I don't use my office email on that. So these kind of things do happen. There are a lot of leaks, a lot of loopholes from which people sometimes deliberately, sometimes out of mistake, they just leak out some information. For example, if you are if you share something of sensitive nature on your WhatsApp group, and it lands up at some other different place, so that might happen inadvertently.
I see what you mean. Absolutely. Yeah. Moving on, let's go to Shrikant sir. Shrikant sir, I'd like you now to come in here, and thank you, Munish. Shrikant ji, I'd like to ask you here. Can you hear me? Shrikant sir? Yeah. Can we have you on the screen, sir?
I'm around. Please go ahead, Nidhi.
Yeah. So I just wanted to ask you, sir, if we talk of foreign policy, how do you see the present situation that has, come up in Sri Lanka? How does that go to our advantage or to China's? And a little more, if you could tell us about the foreign policy as it is shaping now. When we talk of, the contours of India and China's economic cyber warfare.
I think in terms of the Sri Lankan elections, there is a very explicit support that was provided with absolute majority to the Rajapaksa family. And so there is a decisive voting pattern that is reflected. But the Rajapaksa government also has learned from the previous government's lessons, previous tenure that they have had before the Sirisena's government. So I think there is now a overall decision that they will not alienate India at the cost of the equations with China. Of course, this is still a gain for China because now, like in Nepal, there is the Chinese entry. Previously, there was no Chinese entry. Now, there is a Chinese entry through the Hambantota port or through the Colombo port project clearance that is now, even during the COVID-19, is pretty active in its construction activity. Also in the maritime domain overall. There is an estimate that China is planning to invest nearly $54 billion in Sri Lankan economy. And so Sri Lanka is looking at this as a main modernizer. Of course, there are pitfalls, as some speakers have mentioned. There is the debt related that is accumulating. Hambantota was given on a 99-year lease to a Chinese company with nearly 60% stakes in that company has. So there is some problem that is brewing up in Sri Lanka in a long-term basis. Like we saw in Maldives, where the former president has been very close to China. And so Mr. Nasheed mentioned that China is involved in island grab in Maldives, a very stinging criticism on China's role in Maldives. Overall, this suggests that the Chinese outreach is increasing in South Asia. And to connect to the cyber aspects, one of the things we saw is almost Chinese capture of the telecommunication network in all the South Asian regions. In Pakistan, they have the 5G trials, then in Afghanistan as well. There is the Nepalese huge investments in terms of the telecom network that has been laid down in Nepal. While China doesn't have diplomatic relations with Bhutan, they also have a company in Wuhan, for example, is involved in telecom sector transactions with Bhutan. So is the case with Bangladesh, so is the case with Myanmar and in Sri Lanka. So the telecom, I would see this as a long-term, medium to long-term challenge for India because strategic communications are now in China's hands, not just in these countries, but also in India to a large extent because of the kind of equipment supply that they made to India. As was mentioned, the BSNL, 90% is Chinese origin from ZTE, Huawei, and others. So we have to wake up for the 5G related reality in the near future in terms of distributing. So this is good news that Jio has entered into the 5G as well as Airtel and other companies, Indian companies. So I think we need to take it into a long-term challenge, the telecommunication related sector. This is in the light of the Chinese trying to put across the Made in China 2025. By 2025, they want to capture 80% of the market in terms of the Chinese products in the Internet of Things, in the AI, artificial intelligence, in drone technologies, incidentally in Galwan, we saw also the Chinese use some drones in the night of June 15th. So these technologies are increasing, 3D printing and others as well. The problem with this is that we get knocked out because of the Chinese state push in the Made in China 2025.
Obviously, there's a lot more to be done. Thank you, sir, for your wonderful closing remarks. I now request Ajay Lele, sir, what else needs to be done to diffuse cyber threats, according to you, sir?
What is important at this point in time is to realize that cyber is going to be the key for the entire world because of the ongoing COVID crisis.
Right.
I'm sure you would have been discussing all these issues in a physical presence if there wouldn't have been a COVID crisis. You just look at a COVID and how cyber, when I'm using a word cyber, I'm trying to expand it to the entire IT domain. And what Professor Srikanth had just now pointed out, artificial intelligence, then Internet of Things, so on and so forth. So as far as COVID crisis are concerned, significant amount of assistance is getting from supercomputers, from your IT systems. As far as your drug development is concerned, why we are getting attacks by using cyber means particularly expected to be from Russian origin on your vaccine development sites also. This is essentially because there is a huge amount of investment of the IT resources to undertake vaccine development, because large churning of a huge amount of data is possible only because of the cyber. So under these circumstances, cyber is re-emerging or reinventing itself, if I'm correctly saying so, as far as the COVID crisis and the entire world during the COVID and hopefully in the post-COVID era. So cyber is going to be a very major thing of the future because of the changed circumstances and the changed geostrategic as well as a geosocial landscape. So under these circumstances, the threats are also going to increase as far as cyber is concerned. And the threats are not going to remain restricted towards, say, smaller threats like attacking computers or attacking networks. They are going to be huge amount of threats. People are going to get into your systems, which are modified artificial intelligence based systems. People are going to play with your artificial intelligence networks too. So the cyber threats are going to be there in a spectrum of things. And I think one has to be extremely careful, because the way we are depending and in a sense over depending on IT, a day will come that a cyber can, within 1 minute, you will have a cyber bomb or something, and your entire cyber network can even get disturbed. So internet is going to be the biggest threat of the tomorrow, because the entire world is today depending on the entire internet systems. So I think one has to really wait and watch and remain prepared to address the cyber issues from a different perspective. What we are looking at a cybersecurity today, I think tomorrow's cybersecurity is going to be far different than the way we are addressing those threats. And I think earlier we realized, the better it would be.
So I think Nidhi, I would just put across a very relevant question, since this has been taken up by Womennovator. We somehow we are talking about the cyber crime and the the impact it will have. So isn't this also will lead to a lot of scope for cyber auditors? I mean, in cyberspace specifically, and wonderful business opportunity or service opportunity for women sitting at home, who can actually be a great auditor or cybersecurity courses. It would be great, since Ajay sir, you were there, Amit sir is there, and Shrikant sir, Manish, cyber expert, Kanwal ji is there, that, isn't this also be creating an opportunity for women specifically sitting back at home and, concentrating, and maybe they can do a quick course? And is there some solution today, since a lot of women would be watching us? So
definitely, I think you got a point, because today we have realized that even teaching in the schools is possible by sitting at home. So when we are trying to look at the entire gamut of activities which we are successfully doing, and one must give credit to all the people who have actually invented or reinvented themselves, not by getting bogged down because of the COVID crisis, but start using cyber in a very innovative fashion. So under these circumstances, a lot amount of opportunities are going to come up. And I'm sure that women who are sitting at home, even what we call as a housewives, will have ample of opportunities. Even to an extent, I'm saying that young women enterprises who are sitting at home, we require ethical hackers too. There is a great opportunity over there also, as far as looking at the ethical hacking too. So I think the spectrum is too large. And it's not only the men folk, but women folk also are required to be equally participating in this domain.
Give us your sense of view, Amit sir, if I may ask you about how you look at bolstering the Indian space so as to do away with these kind of attacks and cybersecurity issues. How do we bolster India as a nation?
Actually, I was trying to unmute myself, but somehow I was not able to do so. So thank you.
If you could also add on the woman part of it, so that this becomes a very
So
gender-friendly debate and discussion.
There are some. So I think Trupti has really raised it in a very positive way. For every challenge, there is a positive opportunity side as well. And with these bans and the challenges with cybersecurity, I personally have observed like there are lots of opportunities, especially for cybersecurity professionals. And not only because now people are taking it seriously. And there are opportunities, very unique opportunities. For example, there's a large organization. They have never realized like there'll be a situation when their employees will work from home. So they were not ready with the connectivity mechanism of VPNs in place or all that encrypted communication that could happen between server and the domains that they are accessing. So they had to reinvent this entire security framework and gave us that work to do. Second, very interesting aspects of it, like because there are people who are running, they are accessing the sensitive data from home. For example, banking data or any private data. These organizations are worried that how can they ensure the security of that, because they can easily take a picture from their mobile phone and can leak out this information anywhere and can make money. So these are real challenges that they foresee, and they are coming up. They're coming to us to find a solution for that. In fact, they are going to that extent that they want to check the loyalty of employees, whether they are actually open to sell this data to any such lured opportunity. So these are some interesting way, because as I think Kamalji ji mentioned in beginning, only 3% of the attack were because of the technical vulnerabilities. 97 or 95% of the attacks were actually exploiting the human vulnerabilities. And now these human vulnerabilities are more exploited because of people are working from home and they have all the freedom to get lured. So I normally say like there are 5 human vulnerabilities: Kam, Krodh, Lobh, Moh, Bhay, Ahankar. And these are the 5 vulnerabilities. These are exploited by hackers. So we say whether the person is weak from lust perspective, or he has anger or hatred against something, or maybe greed, or maybe highly egoistic. We can exploit any of this. And then scare, like fear. So during COVID time, all this fear was exploited. Even so, all these attacks that we have actually did the root cause analysis, we found most of these were through some social engineering or exploiting any of these human vulnerabilities. So we need to be a little more spiritual also. So I'm just thinking one more new aspect, new opportunities for wellness gurus or spiritual gurus, because we need to be more stable now, so that we should not be exploited, because all these attacks will happen. Now they will exploit our these vulnerabilities, and they will damage us professionally, personally. So there'll be a new stream of experts other than cyber security professionals, but new stream of experts. They will help you to how to balance these 5 weaknesses and make you succeed.
Very well spoken. Thank you so much for sharing your views with us. I'd now like to ask you, Munishi, how do you look at the vision of cybersecurity and scaling out of aggressors, say 10 years from now? How do you look at the new threats that might come in? And if I can see that question again, please.
All right, yeah.
Somebody had a question, yes. Sir.
Shall I start or? Yeah. All right. I believe the very basics of these threats, I mean the kind of vulnerabilities they always target, they have remained same all throughout 90s till today. So whether it's about the very basics of human engineering, what we call in technical terms the social engineering, right? It is the same thing which people used to do in 1990s earlier, right? Somebody will just call up on your landline and then ask, like, try to behave as if they are from the telecom service provider or something of the sort, and try to take out information from you. Basics remain same. So even if you look at 10, 20, or 30 years down the line, technology will change. If you look at present, right? 10 years earlier, we were talking about primarily about computer security. Now we have smartphones very much part of it. Now earlier it was more about personal information, and right now with people carrying a lot of work back home, it's more to do with corporate security as well. So, and just to interlace your question related to the opportunities which have been thrown open, if you look at the silver lining with COVID, especially for women, I think one good thing which has happened to us is that work from home has become a norm, which was an exception earlier. And earlier work from home was equivalent to a holiday, but now seriously companies have modified their processes and then KPIs so that people can continue working from home and then be productive all throughout the day. So these kind of structural changes have happened. Even government notification, if you see, first time I have seen work from home being mentioned in any kind of government communication. Like it was never ever there. So these kind of evolving changes, especially when we look at working from home very specifically, because if you look at companies like which deal with sensitive information. If for example you have clients coming in from Europe or US, where data privacy laws and data security laws are very much stringent, and when you are dealing with these kind of clients, so you cannot be lax about it. If you look at the way things happened in with Wipro, look at the way things happened with Cognizant. So you just cannot leave any space open so that which can damage the reputation of your company. These are very small things, but very critical things. And one thing for which personally I felt that government was not ready was work from home. So if I compare, because I come from IT background, and when I look at my experience working with IT companies, you have a laptop, you have a proper a framework in which you contribute your daily work, and then it gets synchronized, and accordingly its repository is maintained, it's replicated, all these backups are made. So those things happens on a daily basis. Along with that, VPN, very important thing. So if I am logging in from home to my clients network in Australia, I just cannot do it through a normal open internet channel. I need a VPN. So how many employees actually in government who deal with sensitive information had VPN to begin with? So these kind of things, I would say structurally we were not ready to do it, but since we have seen this kind of adversity, I think probably going forward we should prepare so that people can continue being productive from home and then contribute in whatever they can. And let's be ready that these kind of adversities will definitely hit us again. So yeah, we should be geared for it.
Let's hope that this is the end of the pandemics as far as we are concerned. We don't want to see another one. On a lighter note. And so I'd like to end this conversation by thanking each of you from Womennovator and from Shingal Samani for joining us for this very, very, very interesting conversation. We come to a close of Cheeni Kum Part 3, and we're looking at a Part 4 and a Part 5. We've got phenomenal response for the same. And I'd like to end with just saying that let us promote a cyber coalition that might be India's best bet for a cyber preventive strategy to protect national security. On that note, namaskar, many thanks for watching.
Thank you.
So it was really, really wonderful. Amit sir, आप अपना नंबर तो मुझे